So we are hearing from employers across the state that they're having difficulty filling the job openings that they have because there's no housing available in the communities where they have jobs. People ought to know that the housing shortage might look differently in different parts of the state, right? We have a shortage of high quality housing that's affordable for workers in the central cities of Milwaukee and Green Bay and Janesville, where you have older housing that really needs repair and rehabilitation. But the shortage is also in the rural areas and in small towns and in fast-growing job centers. Together, those shortages mean that house prices are going up faster than incomes, rents are going up faster than incomes, and particularly workers on the lower end of the wage scale are getting squeezed. So affordability is declining and workers are unable to live near where they work. So the housing shortage might look a little different in different parts of the state, but it's really a crisis that is affecting all areas of the state and really affecting our economic competitiveness to attract and retain workers. It's this fundamental question a local government should ask: can people who work in my community afford to live in my community so that they can send their kids to the schools, and that strengthens the neighborhood and it strengthens the community and the school system. To address the housing shortage, we do need a partnership between local governments and the state, and between employers and nonprofits. So for local governments, it means looking at your housing supply and asking the question whether there are enough housing units near where jobs are located or near transit to get workers to jobs. And if not, to examine your zoning regulations to allow more development. For the state government, it means adopting legislation and regulations that encourage or require local governments to adequately meet their workforce housing needs. And included in that would be various sorts of tax incentives or financial incentives to developers and to municipalities to build more workforce housing near where jobs are located. So one of the ways that employers can help to address the workforce housing shortage is through down payment assistance program, particularly for first-time home buyers, to help them enter into that entry-level housing product. Employers can also talk to their local communities about making sure that the market is able to provide that entry-level housing, the smaller house, the kind of starter home that seems to be in such short supply. This can also include employers helping local governments understand that multifamily housing or rental housing is going to be part of the equation to attract and retain workers. And when workers live in the communities where they work, that helps to strengthen the community bonds, it improves the tax base, it reduces turnover. That's a positive for the community and for the economic development in the region.
Right now, most of the employers we're hearing from are suffering from workforce shortages in all areas, but primarily in the high skill areas and in the lower skill areas. Most of them are cutting back production. They're looking at alternative ways to try to get their product manufactured or made or shipped. Automation has become something they're starting to invest in. But again, if you don't have someone to run and fix automation equipment, you can't use that in order to be successful in your business. The technical colleges have to become more flexible, more nimble. We've been working on that quite a bit. We've been trying to chunk our pathways up so that we can offer them in smaller, quicker pieces. We also have been looking at the fact that over 50% of our students are part-time. So they're already working. They're already trying to make it a go in the workforce, and they're seeing us as someone who can help them on a part-time basis upload their skills. I think the technical colleges have to take a significant look at how important will diplomas and degrees be in 20 years. Will it be based more on your competencies and what you're able to show and demonstrate, as opposed to having an actual diploma or degree that you put on your wall? We have to really look at what our employers are telling us in terms of what they actually need to get their workforce up to speed. We are definitely hearing from our employers that they need more on-site training that's customized to meet exactly their needs, and that's done just in time in terms of as their system works and as their timing works. We're able to fit it in, we're able to upskill very quickly, and then move them on to the next part of their journey. We actually have full-time faculty who work at companies providing training just in time, on site, and in exactly what the companies need. And I think that trend's only going to continue. It's credit-based learning that they're looking for. They want assessment. They want to know that if they're going to invest on training on their site, that people are learning what they say they're learning. We need to listen to what employers are saying they need. And then we need to be willing to go back and say, I can provide that, but I need your help to do this. We have a much smaller pot in order to try to innovate. We have to do more reallocations. We have to try to prioritize which parts of the degrees and diplomas we offer needs the next upgrade or the next new step. So is it a simulator in nursing that needs to be upgraded, or is it that we need robotic welders because that's where manufacturing is going? That financial constraint means we really have to sometimes make very tough choices, and all of our employers need us to upgrade in everything they're doing. So it makes it tough for them and for us. I think a part of the conversation we're not having right now is how are we going to help rural companies survive? They have a lack of population to begin with, and now they need people, they need trained people, but there aren't high-tech facilities nearby, and there aren't the support systems in place that you find in the larger cities in Wisconsin. So how are we going to fix that problem?
I definitely see a sense of urgency. I know that there have been conversations in different sectors of companies that may want to move here, but their question is always who's going to work for them. Similar to other communities, the aging population is one of them in terms of the demographics. Our population growth is kind of flat over time, looking out ahead, so the low in-migration is certainly relevant there too. Healthcare, there's an obvious need for healthcare, but finding people who will have a flexible schedule, who are highly qualified, and who are able to dedicate themselves to the high expectations you have to meet within a regulatory framework, which is incredibly difficult to navigate, and knowing that there's less difficult jobs with higher wages in that same realm, it's incredibly difficult to keep people in that realm. So you're always using temporary help, and that adds more cost. You also see a bit of a generational gap within the public sector where a lot of senior management and people have been at the county for 30, 40 years, they'll be soon retiring, and then who's coming in behind them? We're in the midst of it now, and we feel that every single time we have senior management positions, it's a challenge. Burnout is a real factor, and I've talked to all my department heads, and almost all of them cited burnout as something that they're having to deal with. Whether that's increased caseloads at Health and Human Services with child welfare cases, which is a very real and dramatic thing that people are having to deal with. Public safety, you've got increased caseloads for drugs and all these other things that you still don't have as many people for. The dispatch centers, their calls are going up exponentially because people just pick up the phone and call with something. Maybe it's an emergency, maybe it's not. I think part of the challenge is how do you address that near-term reality, whether it's in the public sector or in the private sector with markets, and meet those needs at the same time that your ability to meet them is getting restricted. Our ability to generate revenue or keep up even with inflation is restricted. And after, say, 10 years of being behind on just inflation, not to say anything about increases in the cost of doing business elsewhere, you find yourself ill-equipped to meet people where they're at when they come in from the private sector or with years of experience or things like that. So that's a really confining aspect that drives a lot of the challenges that I see from department to department. If you don't have the right people in the right spot with the appropriate expertise who can maintain everything you need, a lot of this falls apart. I get these questions of economic development all the time, and I think there's an expectation that maybe the public sector is keeping up with the private sector. Like people see it's a generally good economy. People can find jobs, so the expectation is the government is doing well at the same time, but we're not.
I think the workforce shortages are certainly something that all constituents are dealing with right now. The workforce shortage comes up in nearly every conversation that we have at the Higher Education Regional Alliance. And of course, that involves the M7 region, those 7 counties that surround Milwaukee. And we've been coming together now for a year and a half on a monthly basis to think about these issues and how we can join forces and make a bigger impact. We know these issues are too big for any of us to tackle alone. And I think that the biggest takeaway is we know that this is not going to solve itself, and we know that we're going to have to partner, all of us, in order to address it. Oftentimes, especially in higher education, we've been known as attracting that talent of 18 to 22-year-old. And we do that really well. And then we know we have to broaden our recruiting pool. So right now we all have the places where we typically recruit, and we know that we have to look differently and think differently about how we recruit. We've got to think differently, not just about the traditional model of how we teach, but also who we're recruiting. And so we need to be thinking about geographic regions, but also our demographics of outside the 18 to 22-year-old and how we recruit as well. Maybe the other thing I think that our employers need to be thinking about, is the changing demographic and the changing mindset of the young people coming out of colleges today. And so, we can talk about it generationally, and we can try to stereotype them in generation Gen Z, Gen Y. I see every day our students, and they're energetic, and they're enthusiastic, and they've got big hopes and so forth. But they are different. There's no question about it. Young people today are different, and what they want in their employers are different. And so our employers now more than ever are going to have to be flexible about meeting the needs of this young workforce that's out there today. So I would just add that to the mix, that our employers need to be flexible and make sure that they understand the generational differences of the workforce today.
I've really heard it from every region of the state that there's a labor shortage, and I know this group has talked about it for quite some time. Some of it's the demographics, and we've seen it coming. In the private sector, with the folks that we're contracting with, we hear it all the time. That they're having trouble retaining and attracting the skill and the people that they need for their jobs. It is something that the economy's going to have, the private sector is going to have to react to. And I know there's a lot of trucking companies now that they're marketing themselves to their employees to make themselves more attractive. The bulk of the way we're funded is through user fees, predominantly the gas tax and registration fees here in Wisconsin. And since the end of the Great Recession, we have seen vehicle miles traveled actually go up a little bit every year. So, that has held pace so far. Registration fees, as we project, there's some concern about that moving forward. But I think just in general, for our cities, villages, towns, and counties, they're property tax based. They fund about 80% of their transportation based on that. So those eroding tax bases are going to have an impact at different levels. I don't think there's any question about it. I think you're going to see the eroding tax base affect, the locals and their ability to maintain streets. With the gas tax at the state and federal level, as we change to more hybrids and more fuel efficient and electric cars, that's eventually going to have an impact as well. There's two sides with transportation and workforce. It's about the ability to provide the transportation network and the workforce that does that. But there's also what transportation can do to help solve some of the workforce challenges. And I think if you look at, in a lot of our urbanized areas and that, better access to mass transit is what a lot of cities are looking at across this country to be able to attract and retain young talent. The money that we were able to get in the last budget for passenger rail, we're going to be able to add more trips on the Hiawatha line between Milwaukee and Chicago. And I know for our major employers down in that area, they've indicated that's a game changer for them to be able to attract and get the talent that they want down in that area.